Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Book of Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is a special episode of Creators Talk Podcast, a podcast for book conversations with your favorite bookish content creators. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookemapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the exceptional Hannah Lisa Lohr. Hannah, formerly known as the Paperback Bruncher, is a book content creator, and she is the host of the Moody Readers Book Club. Hannah is a book enthusiast. She is a Twilight fan. She will travel for books, and she has a spectacular home library. Hannah, welcome to the Creators Talk Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I feel like as a creator, there's not often chances that we get to be on like a podcast. We do a lot of live streams, but this is like a whole new experience for me. So I'm very, very hyped to be here and excited to talk about all things books.
I'm glad you said that because, that's kind of like the purpose of this podcast has always been to talk to content creators, especially in the book space. You see all their great content. You get to see like their awesome videos. So it's good to just see like the whole person and what they kind of think about and how they see the world through books. So before we get into like the conversation, I would love to kind of start with your amazing home library we see behind you. I know you've been doing some reshuffling of it, redesigning it. Can you talk about like just the experience of building a home library like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm 4 years in like with my accounts now, so it definitely did not start here. I definitely wasn't the creator that had like these big built-in bookshelves when I got started. So I would say it's been a slow grind to get to this point. But I moved last year, and that was one of my caveats of moving to the location that we chose with my husband. I said, if we move to this place that's a little bit more remote and I'm making all these other sacrifices, we're going to put this little room in our house. It's just like a little corner nook upstairs. I was like, that's going to be my library. And so that was kind of my deal. The other one, I was trying to push for an espresso machine, but I had to, work it back a little bit. I was like, all right, I'll just take the library. But it's been a dream come true for sure. I get a lot of comments in my videos where people are like, "Oh, I thought you were at a bookstore." I'm like, "No, this is actually my house," which is insane, in the best way. So I've been really enjoying it. As you mentioned, I've been rearranging lately. I moved here about a year ago into this house, and I kind of had a weird system that was a little chaotic of how I organized my books. And then recently I decided that system just like wasn't exactly working for me anymore. I had just been kind of cramming books into this space ever since. So I just wanted to reshift things and have it be a little bit more reflective of my personality. Because I am a creator at the end of the day. So if you're watching like the video of this and not just listening, behind me, this is the same view I'm almost showing 90% of the time. And I realized that wasn't my favorite books behind me. So was just showing random books. And I'm like, that's great. But most of the books behind me before were books I hadn't even read yet. So I wanted it to be a little bit more reflective of my personality in that way, where you can see like the whole shelf dedicated to Twilight that I'm working on, my like special dust jackets for A Discovery of Witches, which is a favorite series of mine. I also collect editions of Anne of Green Gables and Little Women. So I've got those way up there. Wow. It's very tall. I have to get like my big construction ladder and move it around because I don't have a rolling ladder yet. That's on the docket. But yeah, no, it's been really, really fun. And I always have to kind of remind myself like Rome wasn't built in a day. I've got the shelves, I've got the books. If I have to, lug around a 30-pound ladder for another year until I add my rolling fancy ladder, that's okay. One step at a time.
Yeah, and did you have like an inspiration for it? Was this like a Pinterest or like what kind of got you to design it the way it looks today?
There's a little bit of that. I mean, they're a darker wood color, of course. And when I was first looking for inspiration, I think like most of us, I had before some of the like classic white IKEA Billy bookshelves that we see like all over TikTok. And I was like, wait, I would love to have bookshelves that are so recognizable to the point of if I'm not standing there, someone would say, oh, I think those are Hannah's bookshelves. So I was like, well, I can't go with white if I'm doing that because, that's what I had before and that's what everyone has. Let's try something new. And this is actually, they were designed by a company who designs kitchens. So they did kitchen cabinets downstairs and they are the exact same color. So I was like, it felt kind of like harmonious in my house, but also just different, more unique to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to you about that. Because one, I want to build a home library, especially kind of like how yours is, and then two, I just watch like a lot of like architecture digests and
Mhm. Oh,
HGTV. So I'm always inspired by design. So I just really appreciate the warmness of your library.
thank you. I should take some AD inspiration from Dakota Johnson and just like have a bowl of limes if anyone knows what I'm
Exactly.
talking.
That's good. Talk to me about like how books have kind of shaped your life, especially like growing up. Were you a big reader, or how did you kind of get first into books?
I feel like I have kind of a unique experience, at least of like beginning to fall in love with books, but then like the re-falling in love is very classic to so many other bookstagrammers and book talkers. I grew up in a very, very strict religious environment that I would now, as someone who's removed from the situation, call it borderline cult. So I was very restricted in the type of media that I could consume. And that led me to the library. It led me to books. And my parents didn't really monitor my book consumption, thankfully. So I just kind of got to check out anything from the library. And I feel like it was my outlet to the outside world because I wasn't able to watch TV growing up or watch movies. I couldn't hang out with kids from school, like besides at school, I wasn't like allowed to go to their homes. So my environment was very much a small little bubble. So getting to like go to the library on the weekends, and I was such a dork. I would make like my own summer reading lists and they were long. And I was just, I had very type A. So I'd make these lists and I would be reading way above my, school level all the time because I was just consuming so much literature at all times, primarily fiction. I've always been a fiction girl, but that was kind of my first experience of falling in love with books. I was like, wow, there's a lot of different kinds of people out in the world, and this is fascinating. I want to read more. And then I think, like many people, as you get into like high school, early college age, you kind of start hanging out with people and you're just like out in the world discovering like who you are as a person. Your frontal lobe is developing, you're out in the wild a little bit more. And I stopped reading for sure for quite a few years in that time frame. And then, like many people during the pandemic, I was like, what are we supposed to do now? Oh, I used to like reading. Maybe I should try that again. I hear it's stress relieving and we could all use that right now. So that's when I picked it up and started all of my accounts. But I had been running my book club already at that point in person.
No, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people have that kind of story too. At least some of the people that we've talked to on my content the Creators Talk podcast when it comes to, hey, I might have more of a strict upbringing, but like books were just like a really unique outlet for me. Like whether and then some books that got people out of it. Like so was like Twilight one of those books that like allowed you to go into worlds that you might have not have otherwise got into, or like when did you kind of get into some books that were more in the fantasy base?
I mean, I definitely read Twilight and I loved like dystopian, like I love Divergent, like all of that before.
Okay.
And Hunger Games, like, I was in there, like I was the one at like the midnight Twilight bookstore lines. Like I was in it back then. But as far as like rediscovering my love of books and kind of what brought me back, I tried really anything. I really was scratching the surface of like, oh, what's TikTok and what's book talk? So I found a lot of the really like hyped books. Like I remember I found some Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Oh yeah.
I started really learning more about like the Reese's book club picks, which I still follow and really love. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like it's structured. Let's see what they're reading. I dabbled with some of their choices. And then I get really into book to screen adaptations. So
Oh,
that's kind of when I was like, oh, if I heard that this book was already adapted or about to be, I'm going to pick it up because I love comparing them. It's like a little game, it's so satisfying. So I would say those were some for me. And I specifically remember the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. It's a YA mystery series, but it's very different than the ones I read growing up because I feel like the characters are much more developed. They are very strong characters. There's a lot of humor, even though it's mystery. She's very quirky, but she's also she feels like someone you'd know in real life. And that was kind of my first experience with YA being like that deep. And I was like, oh, but this is a mystery. I didn't expect these characters to feel so realistic. So I would say the Truly Devious series was definitely a big one for me.
yeah, I love that, and I appreciate when I look at your content. You have like a wide range of books. You like talk to me because we've talked about even with your bookshelf, like your taste. Like where have you kind of got your influence for your book taste, and what has like pushed you to read like books of vast genres and stuff?
I mean, it's always been extremely important to me. I mean, like I said, with my like restricted upbringing to like find stories outside of my own. So I feel like I cultivated that from a young age, which is great, but it's also something you have to like continuously cultivate. So you even have to like train your algorithms online to be like, this is the type of diverse reading that I want to do. Like, I don't only want to read stories from like myself, like a white blonde woman. I need to like read things outside of that sphere because I want to hear about people that aren't really like me. So I feel like that's something like I actively have to do. But genre wise, like I'm a big mood reader. I cannot, like, I get bored if I stick too much in the same lane. They start to blend together in my brain because I read a lot. Like I average about 10 books a month. So when I'm reading at that pace, like I can't be reading four romance back to back as much as I love romance because now the plot lines are getting confused. It's harder to write reviews on them. It's harder to reflect on them. So I like to switch it up a lot. Definitely have a threshold of like two or three in the same genre, and then I have to switch it up.
Yeah, so like when you read like 10 books a month, like how do you kind of like organize your thinking, or like kind of like how do you remember what you've read and like do your book notes? Like how do you do your annotations? Like how do you think about all that when it comes to reading?
I mean, I'd like to say like I'm this big planner and it's so well organized and all of these things. I do have some like organization behind the scenes of any books that have been gifted from me from publishers. I keep them like in a special area until I've read them, and those are organized by publication date, so I can try to like be on top of those. I also have like a spreadsheet if they're an ebook or an audiobook. So I do keep like things organized in that way. But as far as like actually developing the TBR, it's it's usually kind of non-existent beyond like book club choices, and then it's all mood reader based. I mean, I know I have some classic moods. Like every fall, I'm gonna start picking up like witch books, vampire books, horror, thriller, mystery, because I want to get into the spooky season. During Christmas, I love like Christmas romances. But in general, it's mood based, and it's also like what's going on in my life. I'm sure a lot of readers can relate to that. Like if you're really stressed at work and you're working extra hours or longer days, it's going to be really hard to pick up like a dense fantasy or a really intense nonfiction about a topic you want to learn but know nothing about. So that's usually when I would go for like a romance or a thriller, something short and snappy. Whereas when, maybe I've got more time to like kick my feet up and chat with a friend about the book, then I'm like, let's get into the fantasy series. Let's read them all back to back and like consume nothing else. So it's kind of like what's going on in my life too.
No, I love that because it allows you to be a reader that kind of goes with the flow and your intuition a little bit. Like you find these books through your mood, right? Because even like sometimes when I read books, something will get mentioned in a book that's unique, and I'm like, okay, let me go see what happens if I go read about this person or this author, right? So I do agree with you, and I think I do that a lot too as a reader. It's just in letting my intuition or letting my feeling or my mood take me to the next book. Like when it comes to like when you first got into being a book content creator, you talked a little bit about 2020, but like what kind of really got you into posting and posting about book content online?
I always low key feel guilty for this answer, but like I've always been straight up about like this is my start to it because I don't think it's the typical approach. I come from a social media marketing events background.
Okay.
So I already knew like, oh, if you create these types of accounts, you can work with brands. And so I started it from a marketing perspective. I think a lot of people started to like make friends and find new books. And that came later for me. I was like, oh, these are like the perks. Like, this is why you'd stick around. And that's why I've stayed. But in the beginning, I really approached it as I'm going to make this like a social media portfolio so that I can start working with publishers because I cannot afford to read at the rate that I do. I do, of course, utilize my local library a lot, but like I always wanted the book, like the big bookshelves that I've finally got. So I had to work towards it somehow. And I started doing some research and seeing like, oh, creators were signing up for these lists with publishers, and seasonally they would email them and say, what books do you want for this season? And you would just get sent those books for free. And I was like, I need to get on that level. But I also had a background of I had been running a foodie account for a couple years. So like I had already, kind of tapped into that and tested it in a different industry where I would go to like dinners and do like new restaurant openings and things like that. So I was just able to kind of twist it all to books.
Yeah, speaking of that, when it comes to marketing, how do you think about that as a content creator then as well? Like, sometimes you get free books from publishers. Then sometimes people get paid. Like, how do you kind of think about that? Like, because then I feel like in the book space, when it comes to content creators, the idea is very different than like maybe like being a fashion person where it's like, all right, obviously I'm wearing these clothes, I'm gonna get paid or I get this. Where books, it's like sometimes you do a lot of free marketing for book
Yeah.
publishers. So how do you kind of balance that, or how do you think about that as a creator?
Well, Kyle, how much time do we have? Just
Let's
kidding.
go into it.
This is my favorite
This is what I
topic
love to
right
talk about.
now. No, I think there is this weird feeling in the book space right now of where people are like, I don't like a book influencer. Like that's weird. And they don't like that influencer word. I'm not saying I do either. I'm just saying that's the word that's used. That's the common word. That's what we're stuck with for this point in time. But people hear like book influencer and they're like, oh, like they're not authentic for some reason, or they're not doing it because they love books. And when you look at the content that these creators are making, they've been doing it for years. They read and consume just as much books as I do, maybe more, like that's a lot of free labor. And so I've been kind of battling it out on book threads recently about this topic. I'm actually going to pull up this. It's like probably one of my most popular threads on there. So I broke it down to kind of help people understand how much work goes into a book, because I think people just don't take that step back and think about it. So the argument is often, if you love books, you shouldn't post about them. That's like the sentence that gets you. But if you think about it, on average, time spent reading a book is 5 to 15 hours. Time crafting the concept for your content, like whatever you're planning on making, maybe 30 minutes. Time spent creating that content, maybe an hour. Posting, writing the captions, maybe you're adding disclosures and appropriate hashtag, another 30 minutes. Now, if you're cross-promoting to other platforms to try get those eyes over, another 30 minutes. And then if you're really in the book space, you're also going to spend time writing a thoughtful review and cross-posting your review, which would take about another hour. And I actually underestimated all these numbers. Like usually it takes me longer for all of these, but that totals up to about 16 hours per book. So if a publisher is, making a book on their end for costs of maybe, a couple dollars, I don't know, I'm making that number up, but it is very low. Is 16 hours of my time worth about a $3 trade? No, I don't think so. And I also don't think so, especially when you multiply that times 120 books per year. That is way more than a full-time job. And I think at this point, I've proven that I love books. Therefore, my big conclusion to all of this is most of the work I'm still going to do is for free because I do love books. I'm still going to read and consume the types of things I want. But I want there to be a little bit more grace when people see creators making sponsored or ad content, because it takes a lot to keep this train going. Like it is expensive to keep reading, and time is money, unfortunately. If you are spending time creating all this content, you're taking away from other things that could be earning you actual money. So if we want these creators to create more content for us and to keep that train moving and to grow and maybe buy better equipment and branch into YouTube or start a podcast and like get better, we need to financially support them. And we don't support each other. Like we're not paying each other's bills. And these publishers have marketing budgets. Therefore, I think, it's okay to allocate some of those money, like the money in that budget sometimes. I'm not even saying every book should be paid, but there is a caveat, of course, like only take the sponsorships and brand deals that like fit with your brand already. Like I have turned down a lot of things because they're like, they don't fit with me. I'm not going to advertise a pillow that you sleep with because I post about books, like I'm going to find other book clubs or other reader spaces, or, I post with travel with books. So if it's a hotel, like, all right, I'm going to post about me reading in the hotel. Like that can work, but you have to be strategic also.
I absolutely agree with you. Like we are content creators in the book space since 2016. Bookem kind of spun out of like being content creators in the space, seeing kind of all the stuff you kind of said, and just kind of being a place where we can help content creators monetize and be a place where you're talking about as options to get paid as content creators. Because I think it would be different, like because even if you think about how the publishing space works, whereas so many times even the authors have to work to get to their numbers too. So it's not like authors are getting the best deals all the time too. So us as content creators have to be aware that like we are doing a lot of work, maybe just for publishers a lot of times. So it's not like you as a content creator are trying to, skate by or try to do these things just to get paid. But I do think to everything you said, it's a real job. Content creators are really doing work. You have book content podcasts, like you said. You have real TikTokers that have millions of followers in the book space that are promoting books. And I think everything you said really makes sense. And I think it comes down to supporting, it comes down to being content creators and community too. So I really love what you said right there.
I mean, you nailed it too when you mentioned like fashion and all of these other industries, like they're getting paid. And if you look in their comment section, their like followers and friends are commenting things like get that bag, sis. And I'm like, where can we get that energy? We just need to bring it over. And I do think we'll get there if we keep having these types of conversations. I just think that like TikTok and book talk and like these spaces blew up in 2020, and we're still figuring out what that means 4 years later, unfortunately. So it is like a newer space in that way, where book influencers weren't a huge thing. They definitely existed. Like there are some OG bookstagrams, there are some OG booktubers who have been getting paid for a while, and rightly so. But I think it's more normalized now, and it's getting more and more normalized as time goes on.
Yeah, I think the conversation, you see it a lot more, like even on threads, like you see the conversation happen, which is the first part of it. And the community, obviously the book community's always been there, and it's always been a place for each other's support. So I think, like to your point, it's coming along, and I think the conversation is good to have. I do
Don't
want
be shy. Tell people how much you're getting paid. Tell them
exactly.
what brands to work with. Like we can't be shy. I know as readers we're shy, but like, all for one and one for all mentality here, guys. We got this.
Perfect. Yeah, I do also want to get into you as a little bit as a content creator. You're like your creative process too. Like talk to me a little bit how you think about crafting book videos and what kind of goes into that whole experience for you.
I mean, I feel like I'm like a true creative. Like I've never had a day where I'm like, I don't know what to post. I've never had that. And I know maybe a lot of people don't relate to that. But I mean, I've got too many ideas and not enough time. That's always the problem. But I think my key to it all is flexibility. So throughout it all, algorithms are going to change, new apps are going to become popular. You can't marry yourself to only one platform or only one style of content, because then when it evolves, which is inevitable, you'll be forced out. You won't have those other skills. So I feel like, I started my TikTok and Instagram within, I don't know, like a month of each other. And for the most part, I would post similar content across both. But of course, TikTok is like 99% video. So I got more comfortable talking to camera and creating content over there. And so then when Instagram started making this big Reels shift, I was like, darn, I really like taking pretty photos. But it wasn't stressful for me because I was already practicing making videos and a little bit more comfortable talking to camera. So, now my Reels are my best performing content on my Instagram. And yeah, you can still post your pretty photos and, make cool graphics and do these things and give your audience variety. But you have to be really flexible with what the algorithms want, unfortunately, and give it your best, because like they're not very transparent. Like they're not going to give you a list of like, this is what we want. Just pay attention to what's performing well, what people like, and just as long as you're slowly improving and your numbers, like I don't look too much into my insights because I find it a little toxic for like myself and my heart. It like hurts my creativity to be like, oh, this one tanked and this number is 10% lower than this number. I've done that for clients in the past, so like I know how to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, if I'm having fun and this is performing at least decently well, like I'm gonna stick in that lane for a bit and ride that out. So, just kind of, it's all very flexible, it's all very creative, but I don't know. I think that's it.
Do you tend to enjoy short form content creation more, or are you more, do you enjoy long form content?
So I'm dabbling more in the long form content now. I say like recently, I've been on YouTube for like a year, but I definitely have a lot of YouTube shorts, which is very easy for me to make a short. Like short form is easy for me 4 years in. I can crank out a bunch of those in a day and then, slowly schedule those out so I don't even have to worry about it anymore. So that's fun because, I do a good mixture of finding like trending audios, trending sounds, and, pivoting those to books, but then also just talking to camera about what I'm reading, what I have going on. So I try to do a hybrid of that. But then for my long form, that's something I'm still developing my style. So like as much as like I want to direct people to my YouTube, it's a little scary because I'm like, this doesn't even match my short form style yet as far as like editing goes, because I'm learning a whole new software right now. And, you know, Adobe programs are awesome, but they're really complicated.
Do you use
So
Premiere?
I
Okay.
do, because I did a lot of like research, of course, finding out like what are the best YouTubers using, what's your best like trajectory. So if you know you start in one program, I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, wow, I want to make all these cool edits, but like that's not available in this program. So I was like, all right, we're gonna go for basically the best here.
Yeah,
And
yeah. One question on that. So do you enjoy doing like more vlog style, or would you want to do more kind of like even when we were talking about like those kind of more think piece book conversations? Like, what do you think your style would be there for long form?
I mean, just a mix. I don't like to get bored with what I'm
Yeah.
creating. I don't like to stay in one lane, even there. Right now, I was traveling over the summer, so I feel like that kind of like put a hiatus on some of my more like vlog style content. But I am getting a new computer, so that'll be all changing soon, and I'll be able to do more of that again. But I've been doing a lot of like author interviews and things in like the live spaces. I've been doing some reading sprints for the sake of like meeting other creators in the spaces too. So, I mean, I'll try anything. Like I like to try new things and I like to like meet new people and things like this. When you get to have like a live experience, you get to chat in such a different way than like DMing or comments, you know?
I think you made a good point on the live because I've thought about that too. Just like even like the reading sprints is such a unique way. I see so many content creators now that in the book space that are doing those, and it's just the community that you just like jump into on these lives, or like kind of what we do with audio rooms, where it's like real time and you get to have those candid conversations that you don't always see like when people are doing like their more like basic video styles. So it's just unique. But I kind of want to talk to you about names because I think names are important. What led to your change of your name from your paperback muncher?
Okay, so Bruncher, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think when I first started it, I joined the Bookstagram space like the month before I think my TikTok. And so I feel like I kind of started with a Bookstagram energy, if that makes sense. So I really was like having fun with the photos. I was trying, you know, cute filters and Lightroom and all of these different creative things. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a primarily bookish account. I need some cool, like bookish name that when people read it, they're like, oh, that stands out, but it still sounds like a book account. As I mentioned, I had a food background. So at the time, before the pandemic, I had been hosting events in my local area for women to come and make friends. So I would host a brunch event to support whatever local restaurant. And I would say, all right, what's the maximum like amount of people you can have for a reservation? And they would be like 20, 30. And I'd be like, great. And then I would get a list of women to go and we would all make friends and post about the restaurant to support them. So it's kind of like twofold supporting local business, but also making friends. So I was like, all right, we're going to take my two interests here, books and brunch. We'll marry them together because that's kind of where I'm at right now. And the play on words that like never really translated is I'm a really big fan of the Beatles and they have the song Paperback Writer, which I just like adore. And so that kind of inspired it a little bit. But I do also just like love paperbacks way more than hardcovers. So that also was like, all right, this is fun. This is cute. I like it. So for 4 years, I've been using that moniker. And for like the last year, I felt a bit of like unrest about it where I'm like, it just doesn't feel like me anymore. Like I don't hate it. It's fine. Like it's cute and people know it. And I started going to like more events in person and people would come up every once in a while and be like, hey, like you're the paperback bruncher, right? And that's when it kind of like really would like hit me where I was like, oh, I don't like this anymore. And it's because I want people to know my name. You know, I don't want to hide behind a moniker. It also, I know it's going to stick as a book account, but like I recently got married and my new last name, Lohr, is pronounced like Lore, even though it's not spelled that way. So I was like, that's inherently bookish anyways. Like we can lean into this. And then that also gives me more of that flexibility that I always want. where, you know, my account can remain bookish, but when I want to post a little bit about the fashion that I love too, or I want to post more about the travels, people aren't as like riled up about it, or it just feels more like organic. So I don't know. I felt like I was kind of like hiding behind the name at that point, and it feels like freeing to have it just be my own name.
Now, it makes a lot of sense, and kind of like your marketing background and all that and the branding side of things. That's why I wanted to hear how you thought about that. So I agree with that. I think that's
It is
especially
scary
just your
though.
name. Yeah, yeah. It
It's
makes
scary 4 years in because, you know, there's not good systems in place to be like making those changes. So when you change like your Instagram, for example, people go to search your old username and it just says like this account does not exist, which is a little terrifying. It doesn't lead you to the new one. So like, I mean, I did my best. I made like all of my bios was like formerly the Paperback Bruncher. So, and that's still to this day, in case people are still trickling over, finding that. But like my best suggestion is if you're going to do some sort of name switch like that, crank out a lot of content right after you make the switch with your face or like your traditional style of content. So people are like seeing your stuff because they're going to think you disappeared. They're not going to find you. You need to keep showing up in their grid over and over, and then it'll click like, hey, wait, I thought that was someone else. Oh, it is them. You know, like they need to like have that time to make that connection.
No, that's great insight because I didn't even think about that. But you're right. If you switch your name, Instagram's not going to connect it, so you have to put it in the bio. So then at least when people type it in, you'll still pop up. I think that that makes a lot of sense.
I got DMs of people thinking that I either blocked them or was like canceled. And I was like, no, I have not been saying anything to get me canceled out here. I have not been blocking anyone. Like Instagram, it just doesn't have a good flow for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, speaking of like brunch and community, like how do you approach community engagement with your followers as you kind of scale as a content creator?
I mean, it's so different, like platform to platform, which sounds funny because like a lot of it is going to be the same people that are on various platforms. But now as someone who's like recently on YouTube, as I had mentioned, and like dabbling in that space, like the comments over there are a lot more unhinged. They YouTube does a better job of pulling people across any sort of interest into your content. So you're really getting any eyes on it. Whereas I feel like some of the other platforms, it's more of a curated audience that finds you. So I mean, on YouTube, I just try to like take a deep breath because not all of the comments are nice over there, which is like a new thing for me too. Every once in a while you get like a wild comment on Instagram or TikTok, but like I said, it's usually readers over there and we're really nice. So you don't see a lot of that, but YouTube, whole other ball game. So that one, I'm just like, take deep breaths. And when someone says something nice, respond. But as far as Instagram, I mean, I'm always in the DMs with people. Like, I don't ever leave things unread. Maybe that's that. I'm not saying this is what you should do. This is just what I do. But I also have a lot of time on my hands. I've in the last year pivoted to being a full-time content creator. So I think I've got a little bit more time for that. In an ideal world, I think I would like set a time block in my day where I'm like, you just respond to comments and DMs within this time period and then ignore it the rest of the day. But I haven't been able to practice that control yet.
Yeah, and speaking of community, talk to us about the Moody Readers Book Club. It's kind of its origins and some of the best books you all have read.
So in 2018 is when I started it. I was living in Tucson, Arizona at the time. And Tucson is such like a cute little artsy town. It's very community driven, and there's like a couple of really fun local indie bookstores. So I started out by, you know, just I think it was probably Facebook at the time because it was more trending then. But I started a Facebook account and an Instagram, and I was like, all right, you know, we're gonna read one book, classic book club format per month. But my caveat was always it's gonna be all different genres. The whole point is to get us outside of our normal lens, trying different things, experiencing different things, and then like having conversations about it. So back then we used to meet in person at bookstores. We would meet at brunch restaurants. We were so small, we could even like meet at my house when we wanted to do like a book to screen adaptation. I would just be like, all right, I went to Trader Joe's. I've got wine. I've got apps. Everyone, this is my address. Like terrifying. But I think in 2020, it really shifted. And that's when I also became more serious about it. Like I was really casual with it up until that point. Like I was barely scraping by finishing those books. I mean, we would show up and we would chat, but like we were like more of like the wine club than the book club at that point. But 2020, when we got to go virtual, I like had that like light bulb moment being like, oh, if you're virtual, not only do you get to like meet people all over the world, you also can have authors join you because it's really easy for them to like maybe just dedicate 30 minutes or an hour of their time. You can work around their schedule. Like this is a whole new world. So our first ever like author Zoom, I actually surprised my book club because I love surprises. And we were reading a poetry book. Her name is Mackenzie Campbell, and she writes the most like heartfelt, sweet poetry. I don't read a lot of poetry, but like I said, I make them read things out of our comfort zone. But like 5 minutes into the meeting, I was like, hang on, guys, like I gotta like fix something in my Zoom settings. And I was just like acting like I was like struggling with my Zoom settings. And then I popped Mackenzie on camera and I was like, and we have an author in our midst. And everyone's faces was so funny. So I like to try to, keep everyone on their toes, keep things interesting because it can get repetitive being in a book club. But I mean, I'm still adapting to this day. I feel like we've had really big ebbs and flows of the book club. Some days, like it's all virtual now entirely. We usually do like one annual in-person meetup in Arizona every year. Plus I go to the Tucson Festival of Books every year. So I see a lot of the book club there and I try to like host something there as well. But with it being all virtual, it's really hit and miss.
Yeah.
Running a book club is really hard, to be honest. It's a huge time commitment and it's really hard. It's easy to be hard on yourself about it because in the Zoom, maybe 1 month, 3 people show up, but in the next month, 50 show up. And you're like, what did I do wrong? Did I not post enough? How do I get more eyes on this? And it's a bit more stressful than my regular content to run the book club. So I've been slowly pivoting my approach to trying new platforms and running it in slightly different ways. Like I said, now that I have YouTube, I've been interviewing authors over there. So then that way, those videos, instead of it just being a Zoom and then it's over, now those videos can live on for people rediscovering the book later or joining the book club later. So, I mean, it's always a work in progress. It's a lot of fun. I mean, it would be a heck of a lot easier if, we had a more streamlined approach of like maybe we only read fantasy or maybe we only read romance because then you can build this really strong core base of readers. But because I refuse to change on the fact that it is really diverse with what we read in different genres constantly because I want us all to be challenged, it's hard to find people willing to take on that challenge too.
Yeah, I gotta give you your flowers because like 2018 till now, like that's just impressive to keep a book club together through COVID too. Like to have that be a thing. So I have to say first, congratulations to that. And speaking of that, like what are your tips for as a host to have engaging conversations to like sustain a book club over many years?
Well, so I mean, in general, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to be enthusiastic about it. I know where my strengths lie, and I'm not the type of reader who can come up with really awesome questions on my own. So a lot of times I do rely on the publishers or, the internet resources that exist out there already of discussion guides, because some people are really, really good at that. And that's okay to take their questions and use those. That's what they're there for. So in that case, if I can find a really great book club guide, I'll use it for sure. Sometimes, of course, those don't exist. And then in those situations, I actually have these like this little set of like book club questions and it's little cards. So ahead of the meeting, I'll pull out ones that seem applicable to that particular book. So I have like a baseline of where we can start. Or, this might be a controversial one, but I sometimes will use AI. I'll lean into ChatGPT just to formulate the questions. I'll say like, here's the synopsis. Here's a couple reviews about this book. So you get like a good understanding of the baseline of this book. Now write me 10 engaging questions. And I usually try to give it like a lot of input where I'll say that like lean into this type of mood or lead into this type of energy to flow this type of conversation. And then once I have that baseline, I switch it to make more sense to my personal self in our book club. So, I mean, it's all about using resources. Like, don't feel stressed if you're not perfect at everything, because I'm not. I'm still figuring it out, but I know my strengths lie in other ways. And then in the conversation itself, it's very important to just kind of let it go where it will. Sometimes like, you might have this big tangent on one particular topic because everyone's really passionate about that. and you should lean into that. And it's okay to make up a question on the spot to lean into that and to dig deeper in that particular topic, rather than being like, but question number 7 is this. Can we get back to the agenda? Because it's not fun for everyone. And like, it's not school. We're all just like having fun reading books. Like we don't need to be that serious, in my opinion.
I agree with everything you said. And I think also when it comes to that AI, I think you're right. It's a good, to me, it's been a good sparring partner, but not a great master. So like when I
Yeah.
say that, it's like I can get the questions, but then I'll look at it like, I wouldn't say it like that. I would say it like this. But then I'd say it like this moment brings up 4 questions that you just think of, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess it was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, being readers that we are, we would say it's not the one ring to rule them all, but
Yeah, that's good. Our last thing kind of on content. One of the things I really do appreciate is when content creators meet up in person. Well, we were talking to NMM Books, or Maya. We were talking to her about like Shelf in the City, and she talked about you in a very glowing way and just appreciating like meeting you. So like you talked to us a little bit about having those experience meeting content creators and your experience in that space.
it's really weird because it's like a newer thing for me. So as I mentioned, of course, I started my book club in person. So like there is like a core group of like 30 women that I know super well from those days that, come back here and there with the book club. Like they're still around. So there will be like those local people. But now that I've gotten to this certain point of being able to be more flexible with my schedule, I'm able to like go to more book events and festivals and things. And so that's been like my interest in the last year. This is very new because now I'm not stuck to like a 9 to 5 anymore. So I try to work around like making it part of my job to go to some of these like festivals and events if I can. Of course, that's like a big cost, which once again would be nice to have brand partnerships to like exploit this type of thing so that I can, go on more trips like that. But in general, like a lot of people aren't paying to send you on these trips, so it's going to be out of pocket. But I'm big on a road trip. So I've been road tripping. I went to LA Times Festival of Books this last year, which was awesome. I really love like a free book festival that's outside. Like that is my bread and butter. That's super fun. Tucson is the same way, but I also have tried a couple paid festivals as well, specifically for romance books. But it's really cool because like I've been in this game for 4 years, and now there's like creators that I've been on a live stream with or done like virtual events with or DMing for years. And now I get to like see them in person. I'm like, I didn't even know how tall you were. This is like a whole new ball game. And Maya specifically, her and I had volunteered for a virtual book festival like in 2020 or 2021. So we were both really active in that. So I got to like work with her, but I never got to meet her in person until that particular weekend, which for the first time ever that I know of, a book publisher flew out a bunch of content creators in the space and paid for it all. So that's like unheard of. And like I said, they have these budgets. This was just them learning how to apply it to creators for once. So it was really cool to meet all these people and to see like, are you like the content you create online? And, like readers are usually really shy people. I can't relate. I'm very outgoing, but I'm usually like the friend that like brings everyone out of their shell, Like I said, I love a challenge. But it's cool like when you put like a bunch of readers together, because even like the shy ones, they had something in common with everyone. So you got to like just like really get to know people in a different way. And it was interesting also to start creating content like with other people, because most of us just like film in front of a bookshelf. So now you're like, oh, do you want to like make this thing with me? Which is like a whole new approach. So I wish I had people closer to my area, but I've got to travel for it all. I don't have anyone like locally to create content with.
Exactly. We need more content creator collaborations, more in person. I think like you said, it's evolving, and I think it's happening more and more. So like I said, I saw that. I thought that was exciting. Let's get into you as a reader, and we'll kind of start to wrap up. What is the last book you read? What book are you reading currently, and what do you plan to read next?
So, like I said, I'm a mood reader. So I'm classically that person that's reading several books at once, but it is always different genres. I cannot read like 2 romance at once. I can't read 2 mysteries at once. My brain gets confused. But right now I have a couple that I'm reading. I've been doing the audiobook for Nowhere Like Home by Sarah Shepard. She's the author of the Pretty Little Liars series. So it's cool that like she's still writing books now, like however many years later, when like that's an author you grew up with. Because I feel like a lot of my childhood authors aren't really writing anymore. So it's cool that like she's writing content that's like for my age yet again. Now it's like adult literature. So she wrote a really cool thriller. And coincidentally, she set it in Tucson, Arizona. So I forced my book club to read it. So I've been listening to the audio for that one because I'll be interviewing her soon. I am also reading one of my friends' recommendations. I've really been enjoying reading books that other people recommend. That sounds really basic, but I wasn't doing that before. I was really just reading whatever I wanted and very stubborn in my own lane of like, I'm just going to read things. Yet, like, yes, I might see posts about it, but I'm going to read what I want to read. But lately I've been taking like really specific recommendations from people or asking them like, what's your favorite book, and reading those so that like I can bond with like specific people. And it's really nice. It's really cool. So I've been reading By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult, which is like a historical fiction. And the story behind that one essentially is it's a theory that Shakespeare was actually a woman, but because back in that time, a woman couldn't get published as like a playwright, she had to find a man to be her outlet of getting her screenplays like written out into the world. And she needed money. And, you know, she had all these hoops to jump through. So essentially, she made Shakespeare famous. So there is like all of these actual like facts and theories behind the story, but like this is like a fictionalized version of it. So one of my best friends has been raving about this book for like 4 or 5 months every single time I see her. And I'm like, I don't read a lot of historical fiction. And finally I was like, you know what? You love it this much and I love you. So I'm going to read this so that we can talk about it. And I'm about like 70% through and I'm like, this is really good. Maybe I should read this like more historical fiction. And this is why it's like cool to, you know, get out of your comfort zone. So those are two I'm reading right now, but I don't know. I'm always reading 5 books at a time.
That book sounds awesome. I'm gonna add that to my book list as well. Let's go into rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What's an important book you don't see a lot of people talking about?
Oh, I mean, this is kind of just like my go-to answer for this one is Brag Better by Meredith Feynman. I don't think I've ever seen anyone ever post about this book. It's really applicable to women specifically, women in the workplace, I should say. And I know it's rapid fire. I'm like trying to be quick.
Explain it. Explain it.
The reason it's so cool is because women in the workplace don't really know how to shout about our achievements. And this book kind of gives you this platform of learning how to like ask for a raise and all of these things that we were never taught because we kind of belittle ourselves in these workplace situations and like default to men, unfortunately. So it kind of gives us some of these tools where like a man knows how to be bold and ask for it and confident, like we can do this too. Here's how you would do it. And it's like teaching yourself to brag better in a way that makes sense. So you'd be like, well, last month my numbers hit X, Y, Z, which was 10% better than this situation. Therefore, you know, like it teaches you how to back it up. And I don't think I've ever really like found a book that had such concrete resources like that for women specifically. So I really like that one.
That's awesome. Good choice. If you could get any author to come talk to your book club, who would you want it to be?
Oh my God. I
Or
mean, it's gonna
person.
be just
Yeah.
someone like I would have to like fangirl over. I really, really would love to meet Suzanne Collins, author of Hunger Games. I just think like she doesn't do author events. She doesn't need to. She's wildly popular. She doesn't make a lot of public appearances at this point in stage. She shows up for like her movie premieres and that's about it. Rightly so. Like if you're that loaded and that's not your jam, like do what you want, girl. I support you. But also if I could get you to come to my book club, I would probably faint and like throw up and die, but also have the best day of my entire life.
Perfect. What is your favorite part of hosting a book club?
Just meeting new people. It's always like it's like this weird revolving door where like new people are going to show up every single month. So like we have like someone who joins in every couple times. It's like from Russia. And I'm like, what in the world? Like she's like, it's like 2 a.m. here and I'm logging in. So I really love the virtual component of that and just finding people like she's learning English. So she loves the book club for that resource or, you know, just the people are so different than people I would ever interact with in any other type of circumstance because of the book club. So it's super cool.
That's awesome. What is the best page turner of the year for you so far?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with the romance. And I was like, I just moved my romance down. I was like, I should be able to grab it, but of course I'm not used to like my new flow of everything yet. But it's Tia Williams, A Love Song for
Oh
Ricky
yeah.
Ryan.
I love that book. That was great.
I mean, I just like loved Tia, and I was so scared to read it again because I was like, can she replicate her magic that she always has? Let me tell you, she can, and she can like make it hit even harder. That book, I read it in February, and it is now September, and I'm still thinking about it.
Wow. I need to read 7 Days in June, but I really enjoyed that book as well.
But it's so good, I've read it twice, and I don't reread books.
Okay, yeah, I need to read it. What is, speaking of romance, what is your favorite romance trope?
Ooh, I mean, I do love a fake dating. It's so cheesy and so cute. I like eat it up every single time. I'm like, oh, you have to pretend he's your boyfriend? Oh my God. Oh no. So that's always fun, but I love grumpy sunshine because I joke that that's like my real life trope with my husband. I'm clearly the grumpy, obviously.
What's the last book that's inspired you?
Oh, that's a big one. Oh no. Oh no, let me think. Um, it's not like inspiration in the sense of like a typical answer for this, but I would say I read The Last Days of the Midnight Ramblers not too long ago by Sarah Tomlinson. And it's kind of like a Daisy Jones in the Six, but if the main character was a ghostwriter and got to like write the story of a rock star. It's super cool. It's really good on audio. But that one specifically, I got to interview the author in person at Tucson Festival of Books. And I just like that really inspired me because she was so welcoming and so kind in our virtual interactions, like leading up to it, that like all my stresses were relieved by the time I got to the event. I don't like public speaking. I do it anyways. I'm getting better at it, but it makes me really nervous. So I would just say like that book kind of inspired me in a different way because that's something I'm trying to do more of now.
Yeah, and speaking of rock, and you mentioned it earlier, but what is your favorite Beatles album?
Mm, I'm not gonna go with album. I'm gonna go with song
Okay.
because I have like a little caveat story. But my favorite song ever is "Here Comes the Sun," like of every
Yeah.
song to ever exist in the entire world. Because as I mentioned before, I grew up really religious, and I also couldn't like listen to music beyond church and classical music. But every once in a while, my parents would like let me watch a Disney movie, and they let me watch The Parent Trap. Here Comes the Sun is in The Parent Trap. And I remember the first time I heard this song, I was like, this is real music. Like this is what I want to be listening to. And to this day, like if I'm having a sad moment or like I need like it's almost like a pump up jam for me or just like a recenter jam. Like if I'm just feeling too anything outside of like my normal emotions, I'm like, play Here Comes the Sun and you'll feel fine. And it works like 99% of the time. So
Yeah, I was listening to was it Rubber Soul like the other week. I love that album too. Different song, but a different album for the song. But yeah, it's a great the Beatles are great. And the way we actually I'll have one more rapid fire and then we'll get into how we end this.
okay.
What is the best part of being a book content creator or your favorite part of being a book content creator?
At this point, in the beginning, it was free books, like I mentioned. Now we've got the books, now it's the people. Like honestly, people are like, you don't get like besides traveling, like you don't get out that much. And I'm like, but I'm talking to my friends every single day. And I'm always meeting new friends. Like having books in common with people just is the immediate icebreaker. And it's so cool. Like I just feel like I've met so many friends and now like being able to go to like the events like we mentioned. It's really cool to just like make the friendships online, but then like pivot them to real life. And I don't know. I love the people. It's a good community.
Yeah, it's a great community. The way we like to end this podcast is it's a two-sided question, but you can have two different answers. What do you want to see more of in the book world?
Um, Hmm. So definitely, as I mentioned before, more grace for creators getting paid and more support behind that. So that would be a big one. And what I mean by that is comment something on those videos so that, you know, that helps the content. But also what's really helpful is to like click, especially like TikTok, you can click copy link or Instagram, you can do it too, but you don't even have to paste it anywhere. Or maybe like you're going to go to the bathroom, put the video playing, put your phone down, go to the bathroom, like let that video loop a few times. It doesn't hurt you at all. Like you're scrolling anyways, but just like learning to kind of incorporate that support for other creators in your natural scrolling would be like the one thing I would try to teach people.
I love that because we had Ezra. He's not just a book content creator, he's a writer, but just seeing how he engages with people's content so much on the internet has made us like better how we engage with content creators. Like rather it's just like, hey, I saw they just posted a podcast. Let me just retweet it, right? It
Yeah,
helps. Like it helps
it's not
anything.
hard
It's
to
like the
support
photo.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last question is, what would you like to see less of in the book world?
The policing. I think as a community, like we are incredibly intelligent because we are very well read. And unfortunately, with that, sometimes there becomes like this energy of like, we're better than thou. And I think we need to like take a step back and just like some readers want to read for a silly, fun, goofy time, and that's fine. You know, you don't need to just read nonfiction or lit fic, you know, to be an accomplished reader. If a reader wants to just post about the books they read and never write a book review, that's okay. You know, we need to like not kind of say that one type of thing is the only way to do it. And just give people more grace, you know. I think there's just a lot of energy of being like, I can't believe people don't post book reviews, or some people really just skim their books too much. And it's like, you know, we're not getting graded on this. They're not getting paid for that. Like, don't worry about it. Let's just keep posting in our own lanes and having fun with it and not policing other people's reading.
Well, Hannah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you just so much for your time, your conversation, your ideas. Thank you for being a content creator in this space. Let us know how we can support or anything that's coming up in your world, or just where we can find you on the internet.
So I am on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube as Hannah Lisa Lohr, and that is Lohr. And I post on all of those platforms pretty regularly. And then I have some crossover with my book club, which is called the Moody Readers Book Club, because each month is a new mood. So if you ever want to join in there, it's always changing and having fun. I even do co-hosts sometimes or author interviews, like I mentioned. So we're just always trying new things and always accepting new members, and it's always free.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. We'll make sure to link all the books you said. And thank you again for being on the podcast. We truly appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. This was super fun.
Thank you.